working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good afternoon, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On today's headlines. 2 weeks before his term ends, Philippine President Duterte paid a courtesy call on the Iglesia Ni Cristo's Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo Manalo, on Tuesday. Defense Secretary Lorenzana said he talked to Chinese Ambassador Huang Xilian about the alleged placement of Chinese buoys and nets in the Ayungin Shoal. Malaysia partially lifted on Tuesday a ban on chicken exports that was aimed at fighting domestic shortages, but sent prices soaring in neighboring Singapore, sparking squawks of protest. More diplomats from 5 countries made a courtesy call to President-elect Bongbong Marcos Jr., and one of them was Norway Chargé d'Affaires Jorn Jansen. And first in our news, 2 weeks before his term ends, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte paid a courtesy call on the Iglesia Ni Cristo Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, on Tuesday afternoon, June 14. President Duterte arrived at the INC Central Office in Quezon City, accompanied by Senator Christopher Bongo Jr., or Bongo, at around 3 in the afternoon. The President expressed his gratitude to the INC Executive Minister and the Iglesia Ni Cristo as a whole for the Church's support for his administration. President Duterte recognized the contributions of the Iglesia Ni Cristo for the success of his government and the country as a whole. The Iglesia Ni Cristo has been an effective partner of the Philippine government in its aspirations to help the Filipino people, especially in times of poverty, disaster, and even at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. And take a look, President Duterte also recognized the contributions of the Iglesia Ni Cristo in helping the nation through its various programs such as the Lingap sa Mamamayan, or Aid to Humanity worldwide, and the support extended by the Church of Christ to the government during the COVID-19 pandemic. The term of the 77-year-old Philippine president will officially end on June 30, the same day that President-elect Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. is inaugurated as the 17th president of the country. President Duterte is known for his Build, Build, Build program that saw extensive infrastructure work throughout the country to further spur economic growth and establish key transportation hubs nationwide. He's also known for his war on drugs campaign and programs to stop red tape and corruption. Meanwhile, Israeli Ambassador Ilan Flas paid a courtesy call on President-elect Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. on Monday to personally give the congratulatory letter from President Isaac Herzog. Flas shared in a media briefing after the courtesy call that he and the President-elect Marcos Jr. talked about cooperation in various areas. Let's listen in.
We discussed the very good historical, good and close relations between Israel and the Philippines. As you know, they go many years back, so we did mention obviously the history, and we discussed future, how do we deepen and enhance this close friendship and partnership between our two countries. We discussed how the innovation and technologies of Israel and some of the practices that we developed in Israel. As you know, that one of the priority areas is agriculture and food security. And in general, we discussed about, I would say, creating bridges between Israel and the Philippines to get our relations closer, as I would say, creating bridges of innovation between our two countries.
Meanwhile, the Russian government will help the Philippines in its oil and energy needs. That is according to the Russian ambassador to the Philippines, assuring this on Monday. In his remarks after his courtesy call on President-elect Ferdinand Marcos Jr., Russian Ambassador Marat Pavlov said that his government would help the country during this time of energy crisis. Russia is one of the top oil producers in the world. Let's listen in.
Live, the Russian Federation could extend its hand to help the Philippines in much needed oil, gas and other sources of energies.
According to a fact sheet of the International Energy Agency, or IEA, Russia has the world's largest gas reserves. It is also the world's second largest producer of natural gas after the United States. Before the Russia-Ukraine crisis, Russia was the world's largest gas exporter. Ambassador Pavlov said this was also one of the points of discussion he had with President-elect Marcos. The ambassador reiterated the greetings of Russian President Vladimir Putin to President-elect Marcos Jr. for his landslide victory in the May 9 elections. The Russia-Ukraine crisis has triggered a worldwide spike, not just in oil prices, but also in other products such as wheat, metals, and fertilizers. President-elect Marcos Jr., during his campaign, called for a peaceful end to the conflict. Ambassador Pavlov said that this issue was also briefly mentioned during their meeting. Take a look.
We touched the situation in Ukraine, but very briefly, and the President-elect said a few words regarding the situation. As far as I understand, President-elect would like to continue his independence.
Marcos Jr., during the campaign period, has maintained a neutral position regarding the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, saying that the Philippines doesn't need to take sides. He, however, later issued a statement saying that he is united with the rest of the world in calling for Russia to respect Ukraine's freedom and its citizens' democratic way of life. Ambassador Pavlov said Marcos said a few words regarding the situation in Ukraine, as the focus of the discussion on Monday was on strengthening the collaboration between Russia and the Philippines. And in the war in Ukraine, the city of Lysychansk in eastern Ukraine is massively damaged with no water, electricity, or phone signal, and some residents who decide to stay are struggling with no water, electricity, phone signal, hoping for the war to end. Let's listen in.
Ребенок, зачем мы тут мирные жители? У нас и солдат, никого нету.
Нас тут нету никого. Почем они бомбят?
Зачем они
почем они бомбят? Вот почем они бьют? Нету тут никого.
И почему-то они все этот вопрос задавали, что а вот что вы не уезжаете? А куда мы поедем? Это наша земля. Мы тут выросли, мы живем тут. У нас матеря, отцы на кладбище. Куда мы поедем? Дети.
Russia is now gaining more ground in the east, and this comes after Russian forces destroyed the last bridge linking the city to the neighboring city of Lysychansk in a bid to encircle it. Ukraine's forces have been pushed back from Severodonetsk center, the Russians now controlling 70 to 80% of the city in their attempt to encircle it, according to regional governor Sergei Gadey. President Zelensky said Russia has seized 20% of the country, but not Severodonetsk, at least not for now. Capturing Severodonetsk would open the road to Slovyansk and another major city, Kramatorsk, in Moscow's push to conquer Donbass, a mainly Russian-speaking region partly held by pro-Kremlin separatists since 2014. Taking control of the Donbass region is Russian President Vladimir Putin's goal after failing to capture Kiev or the eastern city of Kharkiv.
Отход!
Meanwhile, UNICEF Regional Director for Europe and Central Asia, Afshan Khan, said that nearly two-thirds of Ukraine's children are now displaced, adding that the numbers are staggering and they bear repeating. Khan briefed the reporters in New York on her last week's visit to Ukraine, where she met with children and families affected by the war. Take a look.
First and foremost, I think we've got to be clear that the numbers are staggering and they bear repeating. Nearly two-thirds of Ukraine's children are displaced, whether displaced inside the country or those who have fled across borders as refugees. And children have been forced to leave homes, friends, toys, treasured belongings, family members, and many of them alone with their mothers facing uncertainty about their futures. So again, the use of explosive weapons in populated areas and attacks on civilian infrastructure clearly must stop. It's killing and maiming children and preventing them from returning to any sense of normal life in their towns, in their cities, and in their homes. And I've seen a number of children, even young children, severely traumatized by what they've witnessed. So we continue to call for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine to protect all children from harm. And we recognize that every day that this war is continuing, it's increasing the long-lasting, devastating impact on children in Ukraine, in the region, and across the world.
She also said more than 600,000 children and caregivers have received mental health and psychosocial support, and more than 180,000 children have been engaged in formal and community-based learning. She said the needs are exorbitant and huge. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said Western countries must send Ukraine more heavy weaponry as it battles Russia's advance in the east of the country. Ukraine has repeatedly begged for heavy weapons from the West, criticizing some European leaders for failing to deliver arms that Kiev says it needs to push back Moscow's forces. Take a look.
They absolutely depend on that to be able to stand up against the brutal Russian invasion. NATO allies have supported Ukraine for many years. Since 2014, NATO allies have trained and equipped tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, officers, who are now actually on the front line fighting the brutal invasion of President Putin, and they make a huge difference. But we need to be prepared for a long haul. There is no way we can predict how and when this war will end, but we need to be prepared to continue for a long time to continue to provide support, and this will be addressed tomorrow in Brussels.
The Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte and Danish Premier Mette Frederiksen were hosting Stoltenberg and the leaders of Poland, Romania, Latvia, Portugal, and Belgium ahead of a Crunch NATO summit in Madrid at the end of this month. In today's other news, Defense Secretary Lorenzana said he talked to Chinese Ambassador Wang Shilian about the alleged placement of Chinese buoys and nets in Ayungin Shoal. The Philippine government has failed another diplomatic protest over China's activities in the Ayungin Shoal, including the installation of buoys blocking its entrance. Take a look.
We hope the Chinese will be listening and also be conscious of the feelings of the Filipinos. Hindi mo kami mapipigil lang mag-resupply sa mga tao namin doon. Nandiyan na kami na matagal na po. The past 20 years we've been doing that and nobody was interfering with us, not even you. Why now?
In a report dated June 10, the Department of Foreign Affairs said Chinese Coast Guard vessels have shuttled Philippine boats on a rotation and reprovision mission. Among others, it illegally fished in the area and installed buoys and fish nets that blocked the shoal's entrance. The department reiterated its calls on Beijing to comply with its obligations under international law, including the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, and the Arbitral Award. And Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana, speaking at the 4th plenary session of the 19th Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, highlighted the risks and opportunities of modernization and new defense capabilities that are critical in maintaining a stable regional balance in the Indo-Pacific. He underscored the need for international regulation on the use of cyber capabilities, artificial intelligence, quantum computing technology, and other new forms of inventions for offensive and disruptive purposes. Take a look.
As we enter the so-called fifth industrial revolution, application of technology to warfare has also become more diverse to the detriment of smaller and less developed countries. Technology has become so advanced that it is now transforming and altering the face and pace of warfare. Case in point is the emergence of artificial intelligence and fifth-generation telecommunications technologies in defense capability development. Quantum computing technology also presents new avenues for domination. While knowledge on these technologies is still in its infancy, major powers show keen interest to explore further development. Quantum computing may likewise render obsolete the critical cryptographic softwares and pertinent encryption protocols that protect sensitive digital information. These new and emerging defense capabilities may be exploited not only by state, but also by non-state actors to target people and critical infrastructure at the extreme peril of small and unprepared countries. International regulation is therefore imperative on the use of cyber capabilities, artificial intelligence, quantum computing technology, and other new forms of inventions for offensive and disruptive purposes. The primary goal of improving defense capabilities is deterrence. Some argue that there is a potential for hypersonic weapons to increase the deterrent capability in the entire Indo-Pacific region. We will see if that is true. Artificial intelligence and 5G technologies, on the other hand, can enhance intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance systems and improve command and control and cyber operations. It is also argued that cyber capabilities can be a great equalizer among states. The idea of unfeasible cyber deterrence is gaining adherence. Morgenthau also said that the balance of power is a perennial element in human history, regardless of contemporary condition that the international system operates under. If you look back at history up to the present, we see that Morgenthau was right. Balance of power that spawns arms race has been with us and will not end. But as members of the international community with advanced communication, closer ties, and interconnected supply chains and trade, we pray we will not again sleepwalk into a general war through miscalculation, accident, or hubris.
The Asia-Pacific is intrinsically a sea-facing domain, which makes maritime security also a perennial concern. The major powers maintain blue water navies to project power and influence. Cooperation between maritime states is integral to preserving regional stability. This special session during the Shangri-La Dialogue explored prospects for improving strategic stability among the major maritime powers, as well as empowering smaller states to boost their maritime security. Again, let's listen in.
I think Admiral Dasgupta has described some of it, but let me reiterate, I think, what I see as some of the planks that are in place to keep peace, good order at sea. The first, I think, is international laws and norms, of which I agree the foundational document must be the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. I think there has been some reinterpretation of it, but I think Singapore's view is the document is very clear in what states can and cannot do. Some of it may be uncomfortable, some of it may feel like it's impinging on states' rights, but it ultimately is a grand bargain, and we should abide by it. The second plank is codes of conduct, and these are documents that improve the predictability in our actions and activities at sea. The most widely proliferated currently is the Code of Unplanned Encounters at Sea used by navies, and the Singapore Navy is particularly proud to have played a role to get all 18 ADMM Plus navies to sign on to CUES during our co-chairmanship of the ADMM Plus Experts Working Group on Maritime Security in 2017. Another way of interpreting it is to say, from codes of conduct to evolve to something higher and something higher order, which is crisis comms. I'm not sure which IISS intended. You can ask the chair later.
There's most countries in the region that share a common vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. And that's free and open without coercion, and where all nations, large and small, have an equal voice to settle disputes peacefully and can thrive under a rules-based order to secure their own interests. But as I stated, I'd like to talk and start with a little bit about the security environment. And today it's being threatened. And as I look at what's going on, I see potentially the most dangerous period, certainly in my 38 years of doing this business, and potentially since World War II. Now, I won't make a bold statement like that without justifying it, or at least telling you what the security environment looks like through my eyes. Let me start with the illegitimate and unprovoked invasion of the Ukraine. The ongoing efforts there, and the authoritarian regime is attempting to coerce change through kinetic activity. The PRC's destabilizing actions throughout the Indo-Pacific, to include coercion, unsafe intercepts against our allies and partners, failure to respect agreements in the form of Hong Kong, border disputes as identified on the Indian border and the line of actual control, and lastly, a concern of a declaration of no limits in the relationship between the PRC and the Russians. That's a new world that we have not seen. And lastly, the DPRK's nuclear and missile tests continue to destabilize the region and threaten the livelihood of all nations. So these aggressive behaviors are escalating tensions. They're increasing the potential for miscalculations, and hence the topic of crisis communications is completely relevant based on that security environment.
And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat...
Kung kayo ay may sumbong o reklamo na gusto po ninyong paaksyonan sa inyong lugar, problema na nais niyo pong masolusyonan, mag-text sa 0915-415-1035 o mag-email sa responde@net25.com. Pwede rin kayong magpadala ng mensahe sa ating Facebook page at Net25TV. Hintayin po namin ang inyong mensahe para agad na marespondehan. Mapapanood nyo kami sa mga sumusunod na mga...
Ang morning show na always nagbibigay ng ngiti at saya sa bawat kada all over the world. Tara na't ma-inspire at ma-amaze sa kwento ng mga bawat kada na nagwagi sa anumang hamon at pagsubok ng buhay. Itago ng mga remote control at tumambay lang dito sa paborito niyong barkada sa umaga, ang Kada Umaga! Dahil kayo ang bida dito.
Masaglahin ang araw ng linggo. Kayo'y maaantig.
Huwag mo ubusin ang luha mo sa wala dito.
Mapapaisip.
What are we gonna do?
Matatawa.
Why so much food? Even no money, no honey, we make utang-utang.
Mapapahanga. At mapapainda.
Twist and shout! Twist and shout!
Kasama si Dakig. Ang nag-iisang Comedy King Dolphy.
Ang pangalan mo? Big Po. Big Po. Ano mo si Fernando po?
Tito Vic and Joey.
Mahirap ikwento, Vicky. Mahabang istorya.
At marami pang artista na kinagigiliwan noon magpahanggang ngayon.
My love, my endless love.
Cine Throwback.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together sa Net25.
Welcome back. Malaysia partially lifted on Tuesday a ban on chicken exports that was aimed at fighting domestic shortages, but sent prices soaring in neighboring Singapore, sparking squawks of protest. Take a look. However, the curbs are only being eased on a small number of chicken types and not the one most commonly exported to Singapore, meaning the impact could be limited. The halt on exports of 3.6 million chickens a month, which began on June 1st, was the latest protectionist step in Asia as prices of everyday goods surge. But it caused consternation in Singapore, a tiny city-state that relies on its larger neighbor for a good chunk of its food exports, including around a third of its chicken. There were particular concerns over the impact of chicken rice, a hugely popular dish of poached chicken, rice, and chili dip, with some vendors hiking their prices or temporarily closing their stalls. Malaysian authorities have now decided to allow exports of free-range and black chickens, according to a notice from the country's Department of Veterinary Services seen by AFP. Singapore media reported that exports resumed from Tuesday. However, the ban remains for so-called broiler chickens, larger birds reared in commercial operations, which are the type most commonly exported to Singapore. The Singapore Poultry Merchants Association expressed relief, but downplayed the impact of the move as free-range chickens are more expensive than broiler birds, according to news outlet Channel News Asia. In today's other news, Octa research fellow Dr. Guido David said the latest COVID situation in the National Capital Region is now more concerning compared to the uptick in cases during the previous week. Mr. David cited the spike in cases this week reached 53%. In a separate forum, meanwhile, organized by the Integrated Studies and Development Institute, Okta founder Ranjit Rai said while it is yet premature to remove the current state of a public health emergency, he believes that this possible surge will not lead to a crippling lockdown that could affect the economy. Take a look.
More concerning na nga siya. Kasi nung mga nakaraan na linggo, tumataas yung bilang ng kaso. Pero bahagya lang tinataas, 10% lang tinataas kada linggo. Ngayon, the past week, 53% lang tinaas from mga 10% to 53%. So yung 7-day average ng bilang ng kaso, tumaas from 86 to 131 cases per day. Tapos yung reproductive number sa NCR ay nasa 1.59 na. Yung positivity rate tumataas din, nasa 2.7% yung positivity rate sa testing. At yung healthcare utilization ay bahagyan tumataas din. Pero sa ngayon, nakikita natin na patuloy yung pagtaas ng bilang ng kaso at medyo bumibilis pa siya sa Metro Manila. Well, sa NCR USEC, in fact, ang projection namin by end of June, baka umabot na siya ng mga 400 to 500. At this time, nasa low risk pa tayo sa Metro Manila. Green pa siya. Pero by next week, we're projecting nasa moderate risk na tayo na after 2 years of the pandemic, malaking bagay na rin dapat yung personal responsibility. Meaning, yung mga kababayan natin, more or less dapat alam na natin kung anong risks ng COVID, and kung tumataas yung cases, nasa mga kababayan din natin yung choice na kung lalabas sila or hindi. Kasi kung kunyari may vulnerable sila at high risk sila, syempre, protektahan nila dapat sarili. Or kung may mga kababayan tayo, may mga elderly, protektahan din natin sila. So, at the minimum, baka kailanganin ng government na bawasan yung capacities sa public transportation or sa indoor establishments para lang at least lumuwag ng konti at hindi masyadong siksikan yung mga tao sa mga establishments. So, ito yung may tutulong ng taas ng alert level. Although, of course, may mga nagsasabi na yung alert level, pag tinaas natin, ay malaking magiging epekto nito sa ekonomiya.
Where we have seen that this variant, if it's going to be dominant, will provide us much more leeway to make decisions, veering away from lockdowns. I don't think we'll be having the kinds of lockdowns, let's reiterate that we had last year. That's good because it's a manageable variant, no? And Professor David will also say, I don't know what's the threshold now. It used to be for Okta around 2,500 cases. We locked down because we know it's going to fill up the hospitals. But even with that number, with this new variant, Pia, we're not going to lock down. Yeah. So I don't think we will lock down anymore. Okay, we might go up to an alert level, but that's the decision of government. Right. And there are economic consequences. There's scientific data and economic consequences to certain decisions, and the government will make that decision. We were some of the initial drivers for alert levels, no? We followed the UK model in our own proposals, but we have a different alert level system, and that alert level system has to also be revamped, no? Given the new situation that we're in now. So that's my position on the issue. Yeah.
The Philippines' continued partnership with China will help the country succeed in the fight against the prevailing COVID-19 pandemic. That according to President-elect Bongbong Marcos Jr. During the formal ceremony for the second batch of laureates of the award for promoting Philippine-China understanding at Dusit Thani, Manila in Makati City, Marcos acknowledged China as the Philippines' strongest partner. Take a look.
I've learned a term in one of the conferences I was invited to in China, and it is a good term because it is, I believe, presents for us another opportunity to grow closer. And that term that I learned from the Chinese is people to people. And I think that it is another place, another area, another direction that we can explore to strengthen our foundations, to strengthen the foundation of our partnership, our friendship, and so that we move forward together into the future. The difficulties, the differences we may have will be helped in every way as long as we continue trying and continue to communicate and continue to be forthright in the interests of each of our countries. I am of the firm belief that as we try to make our way in the post-pandemic world, then that each country will not be able to thrive, to survive and to thrive by itself. We have developed such a close global community, both in politics, both in diplomacy, also in business, and so that it is not possible any longer for a single country to make its own way and say that they will succeed. I truly believe that it is the partnerships and alliances that we as a country will make with our friends and allies and partners around the world that will keep the stability of our economic recovery. And we are beyond the pandemic crisis. We are beyond the economic crisis brought on by the pandemic. We can only do it, certainly in the Philippines, we can only do it with our partners. And our strongest partner has always been, in that regard, our close neighbor and our good friend, the People's Republic of China. Perhaps we will continue what President Duterte has started, what has been described as an independent foreign policy. And this is what we feel is best in the national interest. And I think it is to be advantageous not only to our friends in China, but to all our friends around the world.
Meanwhile, more diplomats from 5 countries made a courtesy call to President-elect Bongbong Marcos Jr., and one of them was Norway Chargé d'Affaires Jorn Jansen. Let's listen in.
On this boat of this vessel coming to Manila, we are organizing a conference on maritime and energy issues, and I have invited the President-elect to come and speak at the conference about renewable energy in the Philippines. So the main topic of our conversation was climate change and renewable energy. Norway has big investments in the Philippines in renewable energy, and more companies and more investments will come in the coming years. Offshore wind, floating solar, and also hydro. The World Bank talks about up to 50,000 jobs, good paying jobs for Filipinos if you are successful in developing this new sector in the economy, and energy consumption is increasing. So offshore wind is really one of your best bets for the future. What we discussed in most detail on the peace file was Norway's engagement in the Bangsamoro. Norway is the vice chair of something called the Independent Decommissioning Body, charged with decommissioning former combatants. We have achieved 20,000 former combatants being decommissioned so far out of 40,000. So we are halfway there, and we look forward to continuing our support to bring peace to the Bangsamoro.
And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned.
Moms, treat your kids to Net25's animated shows.
Miffy, a sweet little bunny. Miffy, a smart little bunny. Miffy, a cute little bunny. Miffy, it always feels sunny. With Miffy!
Liffy's Adventures Big and Small, Sundays at 10 a.m., back-to-back with
Rescue Bots, Sundays at 10:30 a.m. Only on Net25.
Panalo tayo pag together. Wala talo pag together. Let's stand together.
Pilipinas at saan mang panig ng mundo, ihanda na ang shopping list nyo dahil narito na ang online shopping show kung saan ang hanap nyo, meron dito. Narito na ang Shopping All the Way with Jojo A. Eat na hit? We have it! May sayawan, tawanan, pati naiyakan. Pati pets nyo mag-i-enjoy dito. But wait, there's more. Dahil pati celebrity sellers, makikipag-online selling din. At hindi lang yan, dahil may chance kayong makabili ng collectible items mula sa inyong mga paboritong artista. Kaya what are you waiting for? Add to cart na! Shopping All the Way with Jojo A. Opening soon sa Net25.
Welcome back. Phnom Penh Court convicted dozens of opposition figures, including an outspoken U.S.-Cambodian activist in a mass trial as long-serving leader Hun Sen cracked down on dissent ahead of national elections next year. Outside the court, U.S.-Cambodian lawyer and campaigner Theory Singh, dressed as the Statue of Liberty, was abruptly dragged into a car by police after receiving a 6-year jail term for treason. Take a look.
Freedom. I am ready to pay the price of prison in order that I live out my conscience and my belief in freedom, in justice. It's because this regime will not let me go free. It will be an unfair and unjust verdict because I am innocent. The others charged with me are innocent. But we are living in a dictatorship. We are living in a regime that suppresses and represses its own people, that punishes, that uses the law as a weapon against its own people. Liberty is freedom. I am freedom. And this regime is imprisoning liberty. This regime is imprisoning freedom.
Now, the case is linked to opposition leader Sam Rainsy's failed attempt to return to Cambodia in 2019, moves characterized by the government as an aborted bid to overthrow Hun Sen. Sam Rainsy, who has lived in France since 2015 to avoid jail for convictions he says are politically motivated, had another 8 years added to his existing sentence. Thierry Seng is among scores caught up in a push to detain and arrest former members of the now dissolved opposition Cambodia National Rescue Party, or CNRP, human rights defenders, and any dissenting voices to the administration. And as summer nears, thoughts of fresh berries, strawberry shortcake are usually in order, but June is also blessed with what Native American cultures have nicknamed the full strawberry moon. Take a look. And this year is extra special as it will also be designated as a supermoon to add to its lunar appeal. In a season filled with 4 supermoons, they occur monthly from May to August. June's lunar event reaches its peak on Tuesday, June 14, that is U.S. time, but will appear full to the casual observer in the days right before and after the full moon. Meanwhile, the supermoon is an astronomical phenomenon where the moon is at a distance of at least 90% of the perigee, the point where the moon is the nearest to the Earth. The moon is usually about 363,300 kilometers away from Earth. But Pag-asa here in the Philippines reports that the June 14 moon is 357,656.377 kilometers away from Earth, making it appear up to 30% brighter, 17% larger. Now, since the moon is also closest to Earth, this brings a high perigean spring tide or king tide that may bring flooding to coastal areas. Finally, in our news, people marveling at dancing fireflies on a lawn walk through an inflatable whale and pose for photos beside multicolored artworks at a light festival in Singapore that aims to encourage sustainability. Take a look.
Next, and makes me feel like I'm in nature.
And that is the latest news in the ASEAN region and beyond. Thank you for joining us here today. And ASEAN in Focus will see you back tomorrow. Same time, same place. I'm Alma Angeles. Good day.
Welcome sa programa kung saan hindi ako kung hindi kayo ang bida. Ipapakita natin how our guest creatively blends 2 familiar dishes into one unique fusion treat. Okay, napakasarap po ng kanyang lumpianisa in fairness. Para